Hey everyone, this is Andre and Soli with Peace, Love, and Chocolate. This is a podcast where we're bringing back the family and bringing back traditional values. Today, our topic is
our interracial relationship and how we have navigated differences, how we overcome differences, and how you can overcome differences in your own relationships as well. Yay. Okay.
Yay.
All right. So we talked about this in our love story episode that we did a couple episodes back. And we briefly touched on the fact that Andre is a Guatemalan immigrant.
Ooh.
He was born and raised inside of the country of Guatemala.
Guatemalan.
And I was born and raised inside of the country of
Guatemala.
Of the United States of America. And actually, to take it even further back, my parents are interracial, obviously. Look at black and white.
But you're not full black?
I'm not full black. Can
I'm
you
outta
believe it? Can you believe it? I'm a little bit white. So, he really loved. I feel like he actually wanted to do something. But, anyways. Yeah. Anyways, he left. He's back now. He's going to accept me for who I am.
I realized what I was missing, which was nothing. Just kidding.
And so my parents are interracial, and your parents are interracial, but they're
Intersexual. I was kidding.
Intersectional.
No, they are intercolor.
His dad is Peruvian.
My dad's Peruvian, but
Peru.
he's very, he's got very dark skin. Mm-hmm. Not, he doesn't look black, but he's got definitely, he's like a very tanner Latino, and his facial expressions are harsher, too.
Yeah.
Racist. Just kidding. and my mom is white. Like, she's Latina, she's Guatemalan, but she's
she's
white.
like the super light.
So, in terms of color,
like
they look differently. No, not really.
Oh, never mind.
They look different in color, and they are from different countries, so they're also intercultural. Like they don't come from the same culture.
Mm-hmm. So we have quite the history with.
So we're just a mess, huh? Oh my goodness.
And Carlos, oh Lord.
Carlos, they're gonna be like, "Where are you from?" Oh, America. You're American, but. Like, what's your parent? What about? He's like, listen, just stop. Just stop.
It's too much.
Yeah.
I'm trying to forget.
Yeah.
Oh, so so Andre came to the United States for school, and we met, and we fell madly in love at first sight, and the rest is history. Just kidding. Go listen to our love story. He did not come for the citizenship, okay? We're not married because he wanted...
I did come for the citizenship.
No, you didn't. You came for school.
Oh, yeah.
Stop. You didn't marry me for citizenship. It just happened that way.
Yeah, true.
Stop. He keeps winking. Okay. No. For real though. We're Andre's an immigrant, but he's legal, and
I was born. Let's start with a little backstory so people understand.
Your mom went into labor at 7:15.
How about yeah, exactly. You don't even know when, huh?
No.
And I thought you knew me. So my parents are, like we said, my dad Peruvian, my mom Guatemalan. They met, got married, then they lived in Guatemala. Then I was born, and I was born and raised in Guatemala up until I was 12 years old. Then I lived in America for 2 years with my family. Then we moved back to Guatemala. Then I moved to America when I was 20, and I've been there since I'm 25 now. So I've been here about 5 years. About 6 to 8. I mean, I guess I've been about 7 years in America total. Is the amount of time that I spent living in America. But ever since I moved has been 4 to 5 years. I can't, because I moved back and forth. So, and so I'm Guatemalan by culture, I guess, or I was. I don't know.
He wants to be American now.
Yeah, I definitely more identify with America than I do Guatemala.
Isn't that crazy for you?
I think it would have been crazy for me to say even like a couple of years ago, but
he used to be like Guatemalan for hashtag.
I love Guatemala. Don't get me wrong. I love Guatemalan and I love Guatemalan people, but I just identify more with like American mentality now. But so then, and my dad is Peruvian, and have my Peruvian family, so there's all of that culture, playing. And then slowly, you go ahead and tell about your family.
Oh,
I mean, like culturally.
my mom is from the country of Mississippi.
And she black.
She black. She from the middle of, I say it's the middle of nowhere, Mississippi. She'll say, no, it was in town. But compared to everywhere else in the world, it's basically the middle of nowhere, at least to me.
It was in town, in the country town.
Yeah, it was in the country town. Ellisville, Mississippi. If you know, you know, which you might not because most people don't. And so she grew up like on a farm in the country. She's got 18 siblings, so it's like, they spent their time going to like, revivals.
Make sure you say that again so people understand that you said how many?
18,
18 siblings.
8, and technically she has 20 siblings. Technically there's 21 kids, but a couple of them like passed away before she even was born, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, it's a whole thing. It's a lot. And so that's how she grew up in the South, Mississippi. My dad had a totally different life of just like typical, in my mind, typical like steak and potatoes. You go to church on Sunday. You are involved in sports, And so that's kind of where like I'm coming from. I grew up mostly around like my white family members and my dad's side of the family. They all live like within
very
5
close.
Minutes of us. So his family, we're all super close to each other. And so that is kind of the culture that I am more familiar with. Like when I the culture that my mom grew up with, sometimes
You don't
it's
identify
like,
as much, yeah.
I'm
So
like, this is a different world to me.
If you were to boil it down, I would say Soli is like mostly
She
from
white.
a white American culture.
Yeah.
And I am mostly Guatemalan, but I would say actually, even when we met, 50-50 Guatemalan American. Because I grew up in an American school too. So I grew up in an American school in
That's
Guatemala.
why his English is so good. You wouldn't even know.
That's how it's so amazing. Just kidding. But that's how I ended up being so familiar with American culture, and I grew up with American culture, so that's why most people don't even realize that I'm actually an immigrant, and I've only been living here for 5 years, which is a while, but it isn't for a 25-year-old. It's not like I came here when I was a child.
Yeah.
So culturally, we are that way. So now, when you meet or when you talk about intercultural relationships, interracial relationships, most people immediately say like, well, you have to, that stuff doesn't matter as long as you have communication and all that stuff. I want to know what you say to that.
Well, there are definitely, I think it depends on who you're with. For me and Andre, it's not as drastic, I would say, the cultural differences, because he is very Americanized. And because he got a lot of that experience just from being around, like Americans in school and things like that. But there definitely are differences, and I think it would be a lot more drastic too if you had been, like fresh out of Guat.
Fresh out of guacamole.
But wait, I wanted to ask you before we get into this. I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but did you on the show? But did you ever envision yourself marrying a half black, half white American girl? Did you envision yourself marrying a Guatemalan, or did you have a type? Or
I had a type, I think. I don't know. To be honest, I just like girls. So if you were pretty, then you were my type. But I definitely, I did like what's it called? Like darker skinned girls. And so I think you fit the type for sure.
Wow. I'm your type.
Yeah, you fit the type, but I didn't, and when it comes to cultural, I didn't think, what I just thought was I want someone to want to like love Guatemala and appreciate Guatemalan culture. Besides that, I didn't really think of that.
I always thought I was gonna marry a white man. I think partly just because, like we said, that's like more the culture that I'm familiar with. My dad is white, and they say, like you want to marry somebody that's like your dad. But I definitely liked guys of, all different, whatever. I wasn't like I'm going to, but in my mind, that's what I envisioned. But I wasn't opposed at all to dating somebody else, obviously, because now I'm married to a Guatemalan. But I'd never.
Am I darker skinned than a black person?
No, I'm darker.
But I'm
not that much different.
Because I tan. When I was born, by the way, guys, I was white.
He was. I've seen pictures.
And other.
Yeah, well.
Don't get too X-rated
the places
now.
You can't take.
Yeah. Where the sun don't shine.
Exactly. That's it.
But what I was gonna say, so it didn't matter to me much, but when it came to culturally, I just wanted someone to appreciate Guatemala because of that. But to be honest, it was a little weird for me to think about dating someone because I thought, who am I gonna fit with? Because I have all these different cultures and these different languages, and who is gonna understand all of me? My Christian side and my Guatemalan side, my American side,
your black side,
my missionary kid,
your back side,
my Christian side, and the missionary kid side, pastor's kid side. And so who's going to understand all of that? That's what I would think. It's too many variables, so it's hard to find someone that's going to understand all of that. Of course, that's the world. Now that I know, what I know now is that's the worldly mindset of who's going to understand me? When in reality, it's when
no
you are ready,
Andre, no one.
when you are ready, God is going to come and give you the right person. So, culturally, I would say it wasn't. If we would have met at a different time, it might have been different. Mm-hmm. But I think that because of how God changed my heart, and because I was living here, I decided that I didn't want to identify with my Latino side or any other side as much, because when you come into a different place, you have to assimilate to where you're at. So you can't be, if you go to a party where everyone is, let's say it's a costume, the Harry Potter costume party, and you're the only one that shows up. Literally everyone, your friends show up in costumes, and you don't show up with a costume. You're the odd one out. And that doesn't necessarily make you unique. It just makes you the one who doesn't fit in, and it makes you everyone's going to look at you oh, that's kind of weird. So you don't want to be that person when you're in a new culture. So me living here, I definitely adapted to American culture rather than just bringing in my own, Guatemalan culture, which of course there's always remnants because that's where I grew up.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of our differences that we have faced are more so just how we were raised as opposed to the culture. And I don't know why. I guess
that's so true,
because Andre is more so he's kind of assimilated.
That is true. That's a point. I don't know if I want to. I guess I can make this point now, but a point that I wanted to make about that interracial and whatever, all these things. All these inters. And then when people think about, all you need is communication, and even if you can't speak the same language, whatever, not really true, because what you don't, it's not really you need to communicate well. That's not the answer to it. But by the way, we did a podcast on that too, right? Communication. So write it down and listen to it after we're done with this. But it's not about the communication or learning how to communicate well, and learning about your differences. Oh yeah, you're right. So I'm not necessarily I'm not saying that's the answer. No, I don't think that's the answer. The answer is being one. When you have the same values, it doesn't really matter what our, cultural background is and what our cultural thoughts about things are. Mm-hmm. What matters the most is values, like we think the same things, you know, like you knew that you wanted a man to lead you, the husband to be head over the wife. You knew that you wanted a strong man. You wanted a man to provide. You knew that you wanted to be more of like a stay-home wife. And so that's what matters in the end. If whatever culture you're at, if you can, you know, at least speak the same language, I think that can work. If you both, you know, God can bring someone to you, but it just happens more naturally, and it happens the right way when you have both the same value. So it doesn't really matter what color or what in like the race thing or any of that.
Yeah.
But there are differences. I think there are.
Yeah. Wait, so one difference I can think of, like a cultural difference that really showed up. Well, I guess it kind of showed up in regards to like my baby sister when Andre's aunt and uncle from Guatemala were in town, and my baby sister was in a diaper and nothing else. And these Guatemalans, when babies are not wearing like 15 layers of clothes, they're like, oh, the baby's cold. Like the baby's going to get sick. What are you doing? Like, why isn't the baby wearing more clothes? Mm-hmm. That's one difference I can think of.
Yeah, that's totally in Guatemala. You have to wear, you know, you got to wear shoes, and you got to wear, like babies need to be put on swaddled and sweaters, and they put hats on them and all these different things because they think that the babies are going to get cold and the babies are going to get sick if they don't. So, you know, that's just something culturally that's different. Even within Guatemala, though, there's different cultures. You know what I mean? Like there's the Ladino culture, which is like the more indigenous people that are mixed with
city folk.
No, with like European, you know, type folk, and mestizos, and which I think is the same as Ladino. I'm not sure anymore. But, you know, and then there's the more like Caucasian Guatemalans and
like your mom.
Yeah. And then there's the more, you know, just indigenous. They have a completely different culture. Yeah. They're like languages, their culture, have their own languages. And there are a lot of them. There's like 40% of Guatemalans are that way. So, you know, even I can literally, you know, go to Guatemala and feel completely out of place because it's not my culture at all. Mm-hmm. I'm much more Americanized. And city folk are Americanized too.
Can you think of any other cultural
things?
Differences?
Well, there are just some things that I didn't know about that, like, sometimes I'll tell Sully, like, what is that? Sully's like, you don't know what that is? Mm-hmm. Although that happens to you, too. So I'm like, you don't know what that is? I don't know why you don't know. You grew up here.
But I do. But it happened. Well, at this point, Andre's smarter and older and wiser than me. At this point, I ask him I'm like, what is that? How do I don't know anything.
And let's say I don't know something, and I'm like, and she asked me about something, and I'm like, I don't know. She's like, Andre, but I thought
you knew everything, Andre. Yeah. But that does happen. Like, I remember one time you asking me what a cul-de-sac was.
Oh, yeah, the cul-de-sac. I knew I'd heard it, and I probably knew at one point, but, you know, when you hear one word and you're like, oh, okay, and then you never hear it again for years or never pay attention to it. It's like cul-de-sac. I just learned that, by the way, because I was working selling windows, and I was knocking doors, going door-to-door knocking, and I was the driver, and they would be like, stop at that cul-de-sac. So I was like, okay. You know, I just kept going, but then I asked Sully, I think, it was when we were driving, right? And there was a map, Google Maps, and I was like, cul-de-sac. I'm like, what is a cul-de-sac thing?
Yeah. And, yeah, so it's just things like that. Like, some things that are like, I'm super, super American that he's like, he just has never experienced before.
I know. Yeah, one of those things is Christmas carols and hymns and stuff. Like, there are a lot of stuff, like Christmas things that I'm like, I have no idea what that is. And like old folk tales and stuff like that. I have no idea. And sometimes like everyone will start singing and stuff, and I'm like, what are y'all doing?
It's easy to forget that Andre is from another planet. That he grew up in Guatemala. It's so easy to forget. And then, like, when he's, you know, talking to his family, and he's like, Español, spaghetti. Just kidding. And then you're like, Oh, wow. He's speaking a whole other language. What is happening? But it's very impressive. I'm very impressed by you speaking the language that you grew up. That is your first language.
Yep.
So have we faced any sort of hate, any sort of pushback, any sort of like, why are you because like America is so racist right now, like.
Oh, please. No, we have not faced, I at least have not seen anything about us. I don't know if you've gotten it from your family or anything like that, because I was Guatemalan, but we have literally not faced a single instance where someone like questioned our relationship or marriage because we were from different places, or
that
even
we
because
know of.
yeah, or even because I'm from a different country. Like not a single time, not once. Like Sully said, that we know of, and I don't think it's that big of a deal. I personally, this is a controversial opinion. So
a controversial
opinion on this podcast. What? Never done before. But I think it's best if you're of a race, and that's funny because solely, I'm not gonna preface, but this is just funny. What you're gonna laugh after I say this opinion, whoever's watching at home. But I think it's best for the races to stay within the races and marry between the races. Like if there's a black person, it's best for a black person to marry another black person. If there's a white person, it's best to marry that person. If there's a Latino from a certain country, it's best for that person to marry from that same country. And I think the reason is because when we get all mixed up, that diversity, like that, what people say diversity is our strength and all that stuff is not true. Diversity just dilutes things down, and it makes it so much harder. Trust me, I know because growing up in a Guatemalan home with a Peruvian father who and then having American people around, and being around tons of Koreans, people would think, oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah, there are a lot of parts about that are beautiful, but you know what would have been more beautiful? Being able to identify with, like, knowing, not even having to think about, like, what am I? Am I American, Peruvian, Guatemalan? Like, what culture is that? No, I'm just, I would just think. Exactly. I'm a child of God. You would think, oh, I'm just a person that, like I have some of my friends from Guatemala. They were just literally like, they didn't ever thought about that. They were just like, I'm Guatemalan. Like it wasn't a thought in their minds. But I had this like identity crisis sort of thing, and I think a lot of mixed children do too. I think a lot of
I
just
didn't
people.
have that.
Yeah, I think a lot of mixed children do, and I think a lot of people that were born in different. So I think it's best. I don't think it's a wrong or evil, obviously, because Soli is mixed. I'm mixed in some ways.
I get what you're saying. It's kind of like the same thing, If you're like you were saying, like you have to assimilate. You have to be willing to
give things up
and give things up. If you do, like in marriage, we can't just be like, oh, well, this is my culture, and so I'm just going to do it this way.
Yep.
You have to, compromise on, things, on doing things
not
your
really,
way.
but it's not really a compromise.
Well, I mean, like, you have to give up, like, doing things like XYZ way. Well,
we're good, I think.
Yeah. Like, you can't just be like, we're doing it this way. And it would be simpler if you didn't have to, like, give up XYZ because you both were familiar with doing it that way, and there wasn't that, like, sometimes it can be like a struggle and a battle. Yeah,
of course, because then if you're but you both have to give. That's a good point. You both have to, the compromise, quote unquote, is you both giving up your culture for the sake of the culture of Christ, which is the way that God designed it, right? Like the man being the leader above the woman in the household, the woman taking care of the children in the home, and the man providing. Like that's, no matter what culture you come from, at the end of the day, if you go under God, that's the culture it is. You
should, like, I'm not saying you stop doing X, Y, Z things. Like you
Like it could be like music or food, stuff like that doesn't matter. You know, that type of stuff doesn't matter. And if you're fighting about that you're not you're stupid, but you're acting stupid.
Well, you might be stupid, but
you're acting stupid. So yeah, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I do think it's best for the racists to stay within themselves. It's not, like I said, evil or wrong, but it's not inherently beautiful. A beautiful thing. The whole diversity thing is not inherently beautiful, and they're pushing that hard nowadays. By the way, if you go check on Google, if you and people are gonna say like, pause. People are gonna say, what? How can you say that when you married a mixed person and you yourself is sort of mixed, like, and you guys are an interracial, whatever? Like, yeah, well, once you are of God, then you realize like who God is bringing you, and so it was obvious that at this point, like, we're both mixed. It's not like we're gonna make anything else, but I would definitely recommend for people to at least consider, marrying people that are of your same culture. But what I was gonna say is that if you go to Google and you type in like black woman, on the images you're gonna see a bunch of like empowered black women, all this stuff. If you type in white woman, most of the images you're gonna see are a white woman with a black man.
Yeah.
So that's something that like society is pushing down people's throats, is like interracial, like marry between the races, diversity is a strength, and they're like pushing it down, and you're like, wait a minute, no, not really. And you should really be wary of anything that the big tech media, the mainstream media, Hollywood, anything that they're pushing, you should really be wary of.
Yep. So
if this was supposed to be the lighthearted episode,
I know it was supposed to be, and they're like, what can we say that's super controversial and that might, yeah. So I wanted to like go through this, but we're kind of running low on time. Oh, diversity is not inherently like a good thing or a beautiful thing. It's just, it is what it is, and sometimes it can be negative, like Andre was saying. So for us, being an interracial couple is not a big deal, and especially in our hyper like everything is racist, racist, blah 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 blah. I've seen a lot of things online about interracial relationships, and like, make sure you talk to your partner about racism, and make sure you're accepting, and make sure you're not like, what is it called when you don't have internalized racism and stuff like that. I'm like, oh my word, why would you be dating somebody of a different race if you were stinking racist? What? Anyways,
but slave owners had slaves.
Yeah, it anyways. So the number one way that, if you're in an interracial relationship, the number one way, or any sort of relationship, is to realize that those differences are not a big deal.
No, they're not.
Like, and you just work through it, and you don't care what anybody says, if there is ever pushback or whatever it is. It's like we're just living our lives. We're over here thriving. We have a baby. His name is Carlos, and I tell people his name is Carlos, and they're like, "Oh, are you like Latina? Or, like, are you Hispanic?" I'm like, "Excuse me, are you assuming
my gender,
my race?" And yeah, it's great. It's fun to be married to a Guatemalan, and to like. Sometimes when we FaceTime his family, or he shows me like pictures of his family, I'm like, wow, like they're my family. That's crazy. It's so crazy to think.
Yeah.
I would never have thought in a million years.
Yeah. And I think that's a good...
Well, maybe in a million years I would have thought.
I think that's a good point to bring up. And just ending with knowing that there are differences, so it's not like you're blind to the differences, because there are cultural differences, and there are things in the cultures that make us not the same. But those differences, once you come under God and then you accept God's culture and then you really forget about your own culture, it becomes something like just fun and something you can make fun of or something you can just have fun about.
And you don't identify, like, you're not like, I am a black woman or I am a Guatemalan man or things like that. You just live your life and you're like, I am half black, I am whatever, you know.
You leave
but it's just like, okay.
It's just like Nacho Libre.
It's just
I think I am. I think I am. I am. But so that's what you must do. Just think, just go on about your life and don't think about it so much. Don't identify so much with your race or color. You can have fun with it. It's you're still
like
whatever you are.
I like to try making, Guatemalan dishes or whatever. Peruvian foods you might like.
Well, you make all different types of dishes.
Well, yeah, but like every once in a while, like for fun.
No, but you make like the dishes every night here.
Oh, so
you do the dishes and...
That's not what I'm talking about.
Just kidding. All right, thank you guys so much for watching this. Make sure to like and subscribe this podcast. If you are
subscribe this one.
Yeah, subscribe this one. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure you comment and tell us a topic because we love to hear from you. And if you're just listening to this, make sure to share it and also subscribe to it. We are Andre and Soli with Peace, Love, and Chocolate. We're bringing back to family and bringing back traditional values. I'm not married.
Me either. We're not married anymore.
We
don't
forgot
have
our
a
rings.
baby either.
Yeah, no Carlos today either. But see you on the next one. Bye-bye.